Welcome to Local History, Legends, and Lore. I'm Julie Lugo, Cerra, and today our guest is Fred Machado. Fred is a descendant of Jose Manuel Machado. He was born October 3rd, 1923 in Los Angeles County at 5454 Centinela Avenue, at what was known then as Palm Station, which referred to the mailing address. Fred served in the armed services in both the Army and the Navy. He returned home and married Mildred in 1947. They raised their 4 children in Culver City, where they still live. Fred worked for the city of Culver City, as did his father, and he retired after 34 years as the Transportation Equipment Superintendent. Fred is a member of the Culver City Historical Society, sits on the board of the Centinela Valley Historical Society, and has become the legendary Machado family historian and genealogist. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you.
How did the Machados come to this area?
The story really commenced in the little pueblo of Los Alamos, New Spain, which now we know is Mexico. But at that period, which was 1780, it was known as New Spain, being a province of Spain. Jose Manuel Machado, who was born in Villa Sinaloa, which is within 25 miles of Los Alamos, was to become a part of a expedition that would travel to Alta California and would establish, their mission was to establish a presidio at Santa Barbara in 3 missions: Buenaventura, Santa Barbara, and La Purísima, which was in the Lompoc area. The expedition was to be under the command of Captain Rivera. His mission was to recruit a number of soldiers, which Jose Manuel Machado was recruited, and they were called Soldados de Cuero, which is leather jacket soldiers. They assembled at Los Alamos, but before they left on the expedition, they had to see if they could get a wife. And so luckily, Jose Manuel met his wife in Los Alamos. She was a native of Los Alamos, and her name was Maria de la Luz Valenzuela. They were married in the cathedral there in 1780. The expedition didn't get underway till February of 1881, and Commander Rivera split the expedition into 2 parties. The first party left in February 1881 by boat, and they sailed across the Sea of Cortez to Baja California, to Laredo, then up to San Luis Gonzaga, and from that point they were to walk to the San Gabriel Mission and meet the second party, who Jose Manuel was a member of. Actually, the first party were pobladores. They were the people that were going to establish the city of Los Angeles. The second party didn't get underway until April 1781. They left Los Alamos, and their route took them up through Tubac, which was a presidio just across the border in Arizona.
That's the map right there, isn't it?
Right. From Tubac, they headed north to the Mission Javier del Bac, which is really only 12 miles out of the present city of Tucson. And this was a resting point. Then they proceeded to the Gila River, where they went from the Gila, down the Gila to the Colorado. When they got to the Colorado River, which was Yuma, or what we know as Yuma, Arizona now, there were 2 missions there that had been established by the Spaniards prior to the time them getting there. While they were there, Rivera decided to split the group again, and he sent what he called the California party or company on to San Gabriel Mission. Luckily, Jose Manuel and Maria were part of that company, because it wasn't too long after they left, there was an Indian uprising in Yuma. The priests were all the Spaniards, just about all the males, were massacred, including Captain Riviera and his group that he kept with him, because they were there to rest the animals before they could go on. One point that that I didn't mention was that as a soldado de cuero, the leather jacket soldier, Manuel rode a horse, naturally. He was issued clothing, a musket, and cartridges, and a lance, as you can see in the picture.
I think that Sister Teresa Wittenberg in her book included an incredible number of items that they received. And it was for both parties, for the husband and the wife, wasn't it?
Right. In fact, Maria was issued a number of chemises and scarves and ribbons and things of that nature. But the interesting thing about Maria was that although the soldado Jose Manuel rode, because he was guarding the party, she had to walk the 750 miles to the San Gabriel Mission, and at the time she was pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
So you can see the sturdiness of these people at that time. Now they remained at the mission at San Gabriel and for a considerable time, but in August, the first party that left and came and that had to walk up there showed up they reached the mission at San Gabriel, and I believe it was September the 4th, the pobladores were escorted to what we now call Los Angeles, and the city of Los Angeles was dedicated. In November of 1780, Maria had her first child, who was named Jose Manuel Jr. And the expedition didn't get underway for their ultimate goal, which is the presidios and the establishment of the new missions, until 1782. And the reasoning being that the rainy season was there and the trails were so muddy that the pack animals would have a difficult time. So they didn't leave until about April of 1782.
So it wasn't initially that Jose Manuel Machado and his wife came to the Culver City area. They actually took kind of a circuitous route.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Before they left, they were joined by Father Cerra, who was president of the missions at that time, and they escorted him to Ventura, California, where he established, which we know as Ventura, California now, but they established Mission Buenaventura. They remained there for 2 weeks, and then they proceeded north to the Santa Barbara area where the Presidio was established and built.
And a presidio is?
A fort.
Okay.
So this is what their primary goal was. But in the meantime, and in the next few years, the missions actually in 1786, the mission at Santa Barbara was established, and La Purísima, Conception, which is in the Lompoc area, was established. Now, in the next 17 years, Jose Manuel served at Buenaventura and at the mission at La Purísima. And at these missions, a number of his children were born. They did finally return to Santa Barbara. And in 1794, a very important thing happened as far as Culver City is concerned. The seventh son of Jose Manuel and Maria was born. That was Augustine, Jose Agustin Antonio Machado.
And you have some documents I can see.
Yes, this particular document, which happens in Spanish, was actually the request for retirement from the service which was the Spanish Army, for Jose Manuel Machado. But to go back in 1797, and that's the year of the retirement, Augustine's brother Ignacio Antonio Machado was born. And these two would have a distinct association and would work together in the Culver City and be associated with their future home, Rancho La Bayona.
They were the ones who eventually were looking for land and had a difficult time, as I understand it, close to the Pueblo.
That's right. Jose Manuel retired in 1797 and took his family to Los Angeles, the Pueblo of Los Angeles. At that time, there were only 315 people in the Pueblo. As a veteran, he was given land, which we know was on North Broadway, right off between Main Street and North Broadway. And he raised cattle, and they raised their food and raised these children. But Augustine and Ignacio were very ambitious. And we do know that Agustin Machado was running cattle and horses on the Dominguez Ranch in San Pedro as early as 1810. But in 1820, they requested property to pasture and raise their cattle on.
And this is the famous Agustin. This is one of the famous portraits.
Yeah, this is one of the later pictures of Augustine that was probably shot in the 1860s.
And he was the most prominent member of the family?
Well, he did turn into it because the others, I'll go into the fact that they requested grazing rights for their cattle in 1820 from the Comandante in the Pueblo. And he granted them these rights. And before they did that, though, got the property, one of the things, and this happens to be a family legend, that the amount of land that they could request would be the amount of land that one of the people that was to get the land could ride on a horse from sunrise to sunset.
On the screen, I think we have Ignacio.
Yeah, this picture
That's the
is
brother.
Ignacio. This is Augustine's brother. They were both part of the request for the land rights,
The grazing rights.
the grazing rights.
Along with, wasn't it the
with
Talamantes?
Felipe
father and son?
Talamantes and his son Tomas.
I see.
And according to legend, Augustine started on a horse at sunrise at Playa del Rey, what we know as Playa del Rey now, followed the bluffs past Loyal, what Loyal University is now, and eventually about where the 405 freeway is, he bisected the Baldwin Hills and then rode down what we call Manning now to Pico Boulevard, and then back to the beach and then back to his starting point at Del Rey. This encompassed roughly 14,000 acres.
And this is a diseño on the screen of that ranch?
That's right. In order to get the property, they had to submit a hand-drawn diseño, which is a map of the property they were requesting. And it's pretty hard to look at this and tell exactly what it was, but the drawings on the left are the lomas, or the mountains or bluffs that led from Playa del Rey to the Baldwin Hills. And it's kind of reversed there right now because the playa, where it says playa, is actually the ocean, Pacific Ocean. They got the grazing rights, but they had to establish a home in shows the production of food and things of this nature. Now, this is a picture of the Augustine Machado adobe that was built, and actually it's a picture of the second adobe. The first one was built about off Overland Boulevard between Overland and Sawtell, but the floods wiped it out, and this is the second one that was built on roughly Jefferson and Overland in Culver City. And this one remained till, I would say, the late 1800s before it was torn down. You could see it was fairly good size. It actually had a chapel in it, and, quarters for the priest that came once a week or two, or they were traveling priests at that time and would say Mass. The people were devout Catholics, and they used the chapel themselves. They said their prayers every day and every night. That pretty well places the Machados in the Culver City area.
And as I understand it, to go back a little bit, that particular adobe is the second one because the first one was located along the creek?
Well, it was along the passage where the creek, where if it flooded and wiped out the adobe. Actually, the channel, obviously, it used to change. In fact, just a quick note on that. I think it was 1816, there was a tremendous flood and rainfall in the Southern California area. And actually, the Los Angeles River changed its course and flowed down La Bayuna Creek. For a period, and then another big rain came. And it took its old passage back to the Long Beach area and out to the sea, but very few people are aware of that. Now, this is the family crest, and it has a definite history. Our research on it has associated with Portugal. The first ones that we come across in our research is in Portugal. The Machados at that time became famous for making battle axes, and these are the ones shown there. But the actual story of the crest and the name Machado originated in Portugal. There were a knight and his son, and this is going back to like 1747. Not 1747, 1247, where the Portuguese and the Spaniards at the time were trying to kick the Moors out of the Iberian Peninsula. And there was this particular knight and his son, who were not named Machado, broke down the door of a castle with axes, and that's where that name came from. A few years later, the son took the name Machado, which refers to axe. And then from that point on, the family name commenced.
What were some of the names that we found historically that were precursors to Machado?
We do know that, of course, there was no border between Spain and Portugal at the time. Portugal actually was all of Spain at one time until one of the kings gave one of his granddaughters or something the land where Portugal is now. And we do know there's a town, it still exists today, called Machado, right on the border with Spain. And we know that they flowed back and forth. We do know also that the poet laureate of Spain was Manuel Machado. His home still exists. It's a national monument in Segovia, Spain. Also, there's another Antonio Manuel Machado, who was a very famous painter in Spain. Now, this picture here is the second wife of Augustine Machado. My particular lineage goes through his first wife, who was Maria Petra Buelna. They were married in 1824. In 1826, she bore his first son, who was Juan Bautista, my great-grandfather, but she died in childbirth. 8 months later, Augustine married Ramona Machado.
And where did Ramona come from? She was nearby, wasn't she?
Right. Ramona was the second daughter of Francisco Sepulveda, Serrano. Second name was Serrano. And he had the land grant to the Rancho San Vicente, East Santa Monica. That's the area we know as West Los Angeles and Santa Monica.
So he was the northern neighbor then.
That's right.
Basically.
That's right. And then the legend is that Augustine was at a fiesta at Rancho San Vicente when he met Ramona and eventually married her.
And she had numerous other children, as I recall.
Yes, she had something like 13 total. A few of them died. One died prior to 6 months or so. But your great-great-grandmother,
Right, was Vicenta
Machado, was one of his daughters.
who married Francisco Lugo, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, okay. On that coat of arms, was that the only coat of arms that the Machados had? Have you found any others?
No, we found actually 5 different coats of arms. They all relate to the axe, though. They're just different arrangements of the axe. They were very active. The Machados were in the Crusades, the Knights of Templar and the Order of Christ, which were very famous in all of Italy or the Mediterranean area, let's put it that way. But that's about covers the axe. Now this photo here is a photo that we get to later after the death in 1865 of Augustine Machado. There was, at that time, the court ordered a survey, and a man named Ord did the survey. And then they came up in 1868 with this partitioning map, which this one only shows the partitioning of the heirs of Augustine Machado. There's a short story that goes with this. It's just been very recently, within the last 5 years, I was contacted by a cousin of mine, and this particular map has been in the family since 1868. And it had been in her closet, having been handed down through my great-grandfather, through my grandfather, and to her father-in-law, actually, and was in her closet. And she called me up and she says, "Hey, I found this in the closet and I don't know what to do with it." So she says, "I want you to have it." So she gave it to me. I looked it over and I found that it was too valuable for me to keep. So after discussing it with Gail Machado, incidentally, is who it was, we decided to donate it to the University of Loyola, who her husband, Jim, was a graduate of. So that the original linen map, which was actually about 6 foot by 4 foot square, and it was beautiful, just a beautiful map.
You know, what's interesting to me on that map is that, and I think it's great, you can go up to Loyola Marymount University now and see it if you want.
It's available in the library, usually to scholars that are using it for historical research.
Right, but at the bottom of the map, it shows little pencil-like, I'm sure they're much wider than that, but pencil-like lines all of the way to the ocean. So apparently, even in the 1800s, everybody wanted a little bit of beachfront property.
In reality, there were 4 different portions of the ranch were given. It was agricultural area, pastures, residential type area, place that would be subject to good residences, and ocean property, because it bordered on the ocean. those strips that you see on the map are really 300 foot wide. And each of the heirs got a 300-foot strip, but they also got portions of the other. An interesting point on the map, that particular map that you saw there was in the possession of my grandfather, Ricardo Machado. He was in real estate at the turn of the century, and he made 23 marks on that map with pencil that we found. Put a black light on it, and we brought it out, and they're all of interest to the family. And a very interesting one to the Lugo family was a friend of mine had contacted me who had married a Lugo, and he was doing historical research. And her father's name was Juan Lugo. Well, he's having a difficult time locating Juan Lugo, even to say that it existed at that time. So when he visited me one day, and I had the map in my possession at that time, I suggested that we look at the map. I wanted to show it to him because of the historical content. And while we were looking at it, on a portion of the property that had been allotted to your great-great-grandmother, Vincenta, was the name Juan Machado that my grandfather had written in pencil. So that established the fact that Juan Machado was really alive at that time.
Well, that's great. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that, and I hope we cover it in another show. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Cuz, and we'll talk again to you soon. Next time, I'd like to talk more about Ignacio, who was up at the Centinela Adobe. Thanks so much, Fred.
Thank you.